WCBM politically trigger keys as much as the role of government, what it means to live in a republic, consent of the governed. And I'm sure there are a lot of people right now that are going, why are you wasting time on this right now? Didn't you hear that Stormy Daniels had to step down for a few seconds from her lawsuit? This is probably a conversation that we should be having as we're 8 weeks away from a primary, especially when education, talking about the event that I attended with Kevin Leary this morning, and education is a big priority of his, and I think he has a lot of good ideas on what he wants to do. And I believe that the best governing happens at the local level. And I would assume everybody in this room that's running for elected office would agree with that also.
Well, we know the pulse of our communities.
Right. And that's why, I'll get to the phones in 1 second. A lot of people want to talk about this, but I have a much better chance of getting hold. And by the way, I'm not handicapping any of these individual offices. It's the brilliance of the way the country is set up.
That's the reason why the 10th Amendment exists.
Why there is a 10th Amendment. Which, and by the way, how is the 10th Amendment right now? Racism, right? Because it was the argument that was used back during slavery. I have a better chance of getting hold of Councilman Ed Hale than I probably do Justin the Delegate. Probably have a better chance of getting hold of Justin the Delegate than I do Jimmy Mathis, the state senator. Probably have a better chance of getting hold of the state senator than I do Andy Harris, the congressman. Probably have a better chance of getting hold of Harris than I do Cardin or the president. And that's fine. But that is why the best governing happens at the local level. There's a reason why appropriations originate not the Senate. There's a reason. You know, everybody says that it's probably not a good idea for the House of Representatives to always be in a perpetual campaign mode because they're reelected every 2 years. There's a reason for that. There's the most accountability. That's why we give them allegedly the power of the purse. It's really genius the way this thing is set up if people understand it, and if we hold those that we put in office to a high standard to make sure that they enforce it.
Well, people don't understand. I mean, if you walk down this main thoroughfare out here and ask 10 people, what form of government is this? 9 at least are going to say
Democracy.
a democracy.
Right.
So you have just that's why what you're talking about right now is important. It's not salacious, it's not, headline grabbing, but it's that foundational stuff that we've gotten away from. And it's put us in the situation that we are in now.
And Tyrone, we've been doing this a long time. I describe myself as a conservative constitutionalist. The Constitution is only as powerful as the men and women that we send to Washington, D.C., or at the local level, for that matter. And if they don't understand it or care about it, the oath, the 35-word oath that the president, among others, swear when they take their office to protect and defend the Constitution, if there is no bite, no meaning to that oath, to those words, then it's just a 4-page document down at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. that has absolutely no meaning. And if you go through the Bill of Rights and you look at Navy of Liberty, you can make the argument that it pretty much doesn't exist right now anyway, which is why we're having the conversation about education that we're having today.
To that point, Diamond and Silk, the two conservative commentators, big Trump fans that do their show on Facebook, they were testifying before Congress this week. Called up to testify on the Facebook issue because they were taken off of YouTube and Facebook for a while. In any event, the complete disrespect that they were shown by certain Congress people proved that either they don't know what the First Amendment is about or they completely disrespect the citizens' right to free speech. And that just goes part and parcel with what you were talking about. If they do know it, they have no respect for it.
Well, way too many of our elected officials hold the Constitution in contempt. They have no respect for it whatsoever. And the sad part is that they get elected
again and again.
And that is insane. And that is why education is so important. I taught in a West Baltimore high school for 2 years. The thing that blew me away time and time again was that if you introduced a conservative idea to some of these kids, they grabbed onto it.
Well, sure.
They want people to be responsible for themselves. They see what government overreach does to their communities. They see what years and years and years of handouts and programs and we're going to take care of everything, what that has done to the neighborhoods that they live in.
It's almost
And
like
they
fear
don't-
mongering.
No, then they don't
Yeah.
want it. They
Right.
don't want it. They recognize they don't need it, but that's what they know. And until we are able to teach them about conservative principles, until we're able to explain what that really means, and until we're able to just grab a hold of this fractured educational system that we have in this country and put it back together locally, you're not going to have a major change.
And Justin, that's why the originating point of these regulations, not only was it from the Department of Education, it was from the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, which is why all of these topics are buried and camel-nosed when it comes to race, when it comes to inequality, when it comes to discrimination, whether that is race or gender, xenophobe, homophobe. Everything, there has to be a distraction to get away from what the real story is at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Let's head out to the phones. Kick it off with Cindy in Harford County. Cindy, good evening. How you doing?
Hello.
Hi.
And Justin Kinsey.
Hello.
Well, look, Cindy, there's three different things kind of in rotation here. The first one, which I think is where you were going, is the point of education to begin with. And I mean, you look at the 10th plank of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, okay, was having the government take control of the education. That's one thing. Then you have bribery, where the states, can't balance their books and they need this grant money, they need the federal dollars. But then the third part is the threat of a civil rights lawsuit. And that is significant. And by the way, that happened here in Maryland at, don't quote me, but at 5 or 6 schools. So I just think we need, as parents, to be very careful and to understand what is going on, because it's easy to get really upset at the teacher and to get upset at the administrators because they're on the front line. And even the politicians to a certain extent. But if we aren't going to demand state sovereignty or parental sovereignty, then all this other stuff is secondary. Thank you, Cindy. Good to hear from you.
Cindy
Cindy was very helpful when I was going through the Common Core.
And she just brought up a great point in terms of holding bureaucrats accountable. How do you do that? we don't, they're unaccountable in terms of we don't even know who they are. They're totally anonymous in most cases.
Right.
They're unelected. Okay.
Right.
And most people also don't understand that once legislation is signed off on, once a bill becomes a law, then that legislation moves into regulation.
Thank you.
And that's when it permeates throughout all of these little agencies. All of these guys get their grubby little hands on it, and it just balloons into, you know, volumes and volumes in the CFR.
Gentlemen, I'm going to give you the best example of that. Tyrone, you're spot on. When they passed the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, at the time that thing was 1,600 pages, 1,800 pages, and everybody in the media focused on the size of the actual bill. Before that, I think it was the Patriot Act, which was 480 pages. That was unheard of at the time. You're spot on, Tyrone. It's not the bill. It's the hundreds of thousands of pages on how do you regulate it.
Right.
Mhm.
And the people that passed it, even the insurance industry.
We had an opportunity, and I think Maryland should do this. If we had the ability to apply Sunday regulations that affect various departments, it would force people to look at it 5 years later or 10 years later, whatever is reasonable. And you know, you can't say, oh, every 4 years we're going to revisit this. You'll never get anything done, and not like anything really gets done now. But you know, if you set a reasonable length of time to revisit legislation and say, does this solution still apply today? Are these ideas that were thought up, you know, back in the 80s or back in the 90s, are these working? And if
Right.
they're not, you eliminate it. And if they are, you can keep it.
Justin,
And
I'll
that's-
give you a perfect example. You look at the Affordable Care Act, you look at Obamacare, nobody wanted that monstrosity.
No.
Nobody wanted it. It led to the Tea Party. It ended up costing Democrats control of the House, of the Senate. Obama almost got caught at the wire by Mitt Romney, all because of that single piece of legislation.
Sure.
Are there some small boutique things that have happened right now with the individual mandate? Yeah. But you know what? The Affordable Care Act is still very much intertwined throughout our society.
Oh yeah, and it's going to remain that way.
Right.
Okay, and to your point, I'm waiting for the politician. This is the season where you get all the letters from the delegates and the senators. I sponsored this. I, proposed that. I'm waiting for the legislator that understands that whatever it is you sponsored probably already, is addressed in some form or fashion. Who's going to go down there and start looking at law and saying, hey, maybe what we need to do is we need to start tamping down on regulation and legislation.
See, I get letters from my elected leaders, but they're subpoenas. I don't get Christmas cards. I get subpoenas.
No comment.
No comment. Be right back.